All right, well, welcome everybody to this month's Tableau user group for the sports and entertainment industry. Excited to have you here. We had a great session a few weeks ago with the New York Giants and Vail Resorts, and really excited for today's chat. We've got David Duncan on the Interworks side to talk about dashboarding and designing and really putting some good thought in towards the creative aspect, which we all know when dashboarding, that is really what's at the heart of user adoption, which is incredibly important. So we'll go through just some welcome and introductions to get things started. David will go through his presentation, and then we'll do some wrap up on the back end. So if you have any questions, we can take care of that as well too. Just a quick who we are. We've got David from the Interworks side, an experienced consultant here. From the Tableau side, we've got Mikkel, and on the Interworks side as well, we have Amanda and Brittany, who have been paramount in helping put this whole thing together. And myself, my name is Carlos Kesbers. I'm an analytics consultant here with Interworks as well. Mikkel, are you there? How are you doing today?
I am here. I'm doing well. Hope you're doing well too.
Wonderful. Well, Mikkel has been terrific on the Tableau side for the sports industry. And has been on calls with many teams over the past few weeks, making sure that Tableau has been working well for everybody, learning tips, tricks, and best practices across the industry. So she's been terrific on that side as well. So why are we here? Just as a quick reminder to everybody, plain and simple, sharing best practices. Tableau is a wonderful product that many sports teams and leagues and vendors, and I shouldn't even say sports, but even from the entertainment side as well too, is really powerful for what we're trying to accomplish in decision making using data. So here's just a quick poll that we put out to the LinkedIn group, and fortunately, we're kind of checking the boxes here on what you guys would like to see. So the majority of people, examples from industry peers and tips and tricks are really what everybody would like to see. So we're excited to help provide that over the next several calls that we're going to be hosting. We hope that you use this time to connect with others, post questions in the Q&A box within Zoom. Use the chat to get to know everybody else that's actually here as well too. Please don't be shy. Put in there who you are, what your role is, what organization you're with, and use that as an opportunity to launch into more networking after the call is complete as well too. Did want to plug here, since the last time that we all chatted a couple months ago, we did launch the Tableau Sports and Entertainment user group. So please go find that on LinkedIn and connect on that. Either myself or Mikkel will go ahead and grant the invites, and then you get those conversations going from a networking standpoint of best practices and tips and tricks, and share good articles, good webinars, good education, and it's a really powerful way quickly to learn some more best practices. And then just quick housekeeping. We have a goal of meeting every other month. There is a secondary goal in that sense too, of maybe doing it every month. Mikkel and I have had some really great conversations with teams over the past couple of weeks who are interested in presenting. So if you would like to present, please reach out to us. Our email addresses are there. We're easy to find on LinkedIn as well too. Shoot us a note. There are some really cool, terrific things that a lot of people are putting together within their organizations. And we would love to help share that to your peers around the industry as well too. So use the chat as well to talk about anything that you guys are doing as well too. Yes, trivia time. This is always the fun thing that we're going to help transition over into David's talk. And one of the things that I like to remind everybody within the sports and entertainment space is that although it does shade heavily towards sports and teams and everything, there's an entertainment side of this too. So we've had pretty cool conversations recently with movie production companies and hospitality areas, and all of those fall within the umbrella and doing the same type of things too. So the trivia for today, for a gift card to the Tableau store, the first to answer in the chat, so go ahead and get those keyboards ready, or if you like Googling this real quick, feel free to do that as well too. But in the movie Kill Bill, The bride's yellow jumpsuit pays an homage to whom? Cue the Jeopardy music. Oh, Bob Patterson, right out of the gate. Bruce Lee. Yes. Okay, that's correct. Congrats to Bob. That was a cool thing that they did to honor Bruce Lee in his last film when he wore his famous yellow jumpsuit, as you can see here. The similarities between those two things, which is great. Kill Bill, wonderful movie, wonderful sequel as well too. And interestingly enough, Carlos, why in the heck are you doing a trivia on Kill Bill? Well, the reason why is that David Duncan's favorite movie is Kill Bill. So before I throw it over to him for my one question as to why Kill Bill, I do want to just say this is a fun full circle moment for me. About, I think it was 4 years ago, in a previous life with the Oklahoma City Thunder and their innovation space, we hosted an Oklahoma City Tableau user group where David actually came in and I was able to introduce him to give a design chat for that user group. And I'm thrilled to be able to do that now industry-wide in the sports and entertainment space too. So there's a fun photo from that space and David giving that chat there. But David, I want to throw it over to you now. Can you tell us a little bit about why Kill Bill is your favorite movie?
Yeah, okay, so I guess I like it because it's split into two parts, yet I can cheese my way out of the answer by just saying Kill Bill, and no one knows if I'm talking about part one or part two, because they do belong together. It's dramatic, the music is stylish, the cinematography is top-notch, and you can't help but smile, even though it's like really wacky all the way through. So that's it.
That's awesome. All right, well, David, thanks. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen if you want to go ahead and pick up the controls, and we will hand things over to you.
Yeah, sure thing. Can you see this okay? Is this showing the right screen?
It is, yes.
All right. So actually, let me just move my cameras around. There we go. All right, so hello everyone. Welcome to Designing for Data. It's great to be here. I have a lot of slides to get through, so I'm just going to pick it up and go right in. But like Carla said, drop some questions in the chat if you have anything that sticks out to you, that's confusing, interesting, or whatever. So just a little bit about myself. I'm an experienced consultant with Interworks, and that means that I sit behind a laptop designing and pushing pixels around and coming up with layouts. I have cats in my life. I've got two cats, Simon and Gambit. They're amazing. They're just watching birds all the time. I've been with Interworks for 7.5 years. And the past 4.5 of those have been on the business intelligence side of things. So when I started though, I had come from an investigative journalism magazine doing design there. But I came to Interworks to do branding. And so I was working on a new logo for us, redesigned the website, new color palettes, that sort of thing. And then over time, I helped transition to a new round of the marketing team where they've continued to push the branding and continue to find new ways to engage the community and take Interworks further. But there was a moment about 4.5 years ago when I was more familiar with Tableau, and I was seeing like what the defaults were that were coming out of a data viz, and it would look something kind of like what you see here on the screen. So this is a game summary for some random sports team. We see that we're looking at some net revenue up there, yield per ticket, tickets and revenue by ticket type, and tickets and revenue by team. All cool stuff. But I felt like there was a little bit of a lack of engagement. Like it was kind of hard to really care too much about these things. And so just to try to give you a high level of what I do at Interworks, my whole goal is to turn something like what you see there into something more like what you see now on the screen. So it's essentially the same concept, but we have hierarchy at play. We're using color a bit more meaningfully. We've put our interesting KPIs up on the left, and we've also added some things like the most attended matchup, the most attended month of all these matchups, the record for this team. And then, utilizing color a bit, we can then start to have some more interesting visualizations. We also introduce the concept of how do ticket sales change based on the team's performance? Do they potentially go down or do they go up? Are people more likely to be attending based on the team's performance? All kind of new questions that we can, take that same data and then be like, what if we could create something new? But getting to this point, it wasn't just like an easy, transition from like a branding side of things to data design. But all I really knew at the end of the day is that I wanted something to feel welcoming. I wanted us to have dashboards that people wanted to visit. And I used a few pictures of architecture and homes throughout this presentation because I've realized that it's a much easier way to talk about design than boxes and data displays. So we're going to use a little bit of this analogy of, is this a space that people want to even visit? Where alternatively, if I were looking at, a really complicated dashboard and I didn't know what the heck was going on, I didn't know who created it or what, when the data was updated, it would feel a little bit more like this. A few scary doors and like, I just need to stay away from them, right? So getting into, designing successful and good-looking dashboards, I've come up with this analogy of this whole house concept, right? And so for just the smallest piece of the puzzle would be just a single chart that shows up on a dashboard. So I think of this as one item, an important item, a desk in a room. So on my desk currently, I have my water, I have a book or two, I've got keyboard, speakers, and a writing utensil, and that's about it. It's the things that I need to do to deliver this presentation well, to continue doing work today until I'm done working for the day. It's the things I need to achieve or to utilize right now for what I'm working on. But then if we zoom out a touch, right, a desk isn't just sitting on its own. It belongs in a room with lots of other things going on, and possibly other people will be using this room. And to kind of illustrate a bad flow of a room and a good flow, I'm just going to let this about 30-second clip play, and it'll kind of illustrate some of these things. We see a guy going about his normal routine. There's a pet there. Frustrations, headaches, all because of a layout of a room. And then a designer comes in and says, hey, what if these things were positioned this way? What if we moved this over here? Let's imagine something new. And then in a linear fashion, from left to right, we're able to, prepare the food, get the dishes we need for what we're going for. We can cook it. We can then, place it on the table. The human is happy, the cat is happy, and we can move on. So, all of these things kind of coming in harmony, played together for a single room. And then when we zoom out even further, well, these rooms have to exist in some sort of house. So we use this part of the analogy to say, like, how do all of these rooms connect? Meaning, how do your dashboards connect to each other? Are your rooms sufficient? Are they giving everyone what they need? And then is this house even something that people want to enter? And, going through so many large dashboarding projects over the years, this is kind of how we can split up content in a very, stylized, in a very simplified way. So we have a concept of an attic. There's things that, yes, we're keeping data on, but we don't necessarily need to show everybody that stuff. But on the flip side of things, we have the first floor, which is the welcoming spot, the entry point, the, hey, let's get everyone to care about this and let them know that we are taking care of them, that type of spot. And, how that might look like in real life would be a room like this. This is a good entry location. There's lots of different types of seating. There's there's outlets for you to charge your computer. There's sinks, you can grab your water through the kitchen. There's also hallways that direct you to other parts of the building. So a thoroughfare to get to something new. And we want people to, feel comfortable and have the things that they need, because, just integrating something like a brand new, Tableau ecosystem or brand new reporting structure, period, no matter what it is, you're going to have conventions that you have to fit in with your company. And so it's like, if our company were to look like this and we just got to drop something brand new in it, we need to make sure that we're kind of complying. We're not ruffling any feathers, but it fits seamlessly into the web of everything else that is already existing around us, right? We want to be a good neighbor. We want to add to the neighborhood instead of being like this thing that everyone is frustrated by or there's not adoption with, right? So here's the agenda for my session. We just went through the intro. I'm going to briefly talk about creating a floor plan for setting up for a big design project. I'm going to talk about my checklist that I use when I'm in the middle of a big project, and then a little bit about how at Interworks we try to take it further with collaboration and experimenting. So creating a floor plan looks a little bit like the following steps. We first need to be sure we're asking the right questions about what we're doing, figuring out the restraints or constraints rather that we need to play within. What are our guardrails? Is there a story we're trying to get across? Are we trying to get someone to care about something that they might not care about right now? Are we inspired? Do we have anything that we're basing this off of? Or are we trying to fit within maybe brand guidelines? Or are we trying to do something new here to catch people's attention? And then are we ready to prepare a wireframe? I'll talk a little bit about each of these things. So asking the right questions, this is gathering the stakeholders, people who are involved in a project. First, I got to do a little round of interviews with those people to say, hey, primarily, who's going to be using this dashboard? What are they looking for when they're using it? And where do your current analytics fall short? Meaning, why are we upgrading to, something more intense like Tableau? Like, what was it that was who hit the block there of like, hey, Excel's just not cutting it. We got to have more intense reporting. We need to get things where we can explore things a bit better, because if I can understand that, red flag that initiated this change, that's going to help me design a better end solution that fits the people that are asking for Tableau to be integrated. So once we get those first bits of questions, then we say, cool, thanks for that basic overview. Now I need to know every single person who works on this dashboard. I want to know who's using it, but also who contributes to it, because they're also going to be opening up those workbooks and they're going to need to know how to use them, and they're going to need to know where the data is coming from. And I want opinions from a very well-rounded table to get opinions and ideas from everyone who's using it. And then, are we sure we're asking the right questions on this dashboard? Or is this just something that has existed from 5 years ago and we're just kind of carrying on with it? I want to try to understand if there are new things that we could be asking, or maybe we could be cutting some dashboards in half to further target what we're actually after. And then again, how did we discover this pitfall, or this, not pitfall, but how did we discover this need to jump into a new realm of analytics? And then figuring out, what kind of restraints we have. So I need to know, is our data ready to be, is it blended? Is it ready to go? Can we just pull from it as we need? Or are there some hoops we have to jump through to make sure that all of this stuff is going to communicate together properly? Are we designing for a specific screen size? Maybe there was a brand new rollout of new desktop monitors and we need to make these things fit this 30-inch wide monitor, or maybe it's going to be in a more public facing space, and so there's like an HD TV somewhere. Do we need to design for iPad, meaning like touch points, because we can't really hover on the iPad as easily? So at a very general level, I might start with what you see on the screen there, which is 1200 by 900, just because that's a very basic, wide display. But that's if I have no clues as to where else this is going to show up on, right? Because things will drastically change if I'm doing something for mobile or for a TV. So in mobile, I'm trying to create a linear thread from the most important information down to the most granular, for very simply the title, date, who's contributing, top level KPI, and then it's going to continually get more and more gradual. Whereas something like what you see on the right side of the screen, this would be a dashboard that is supposed to facilitate conversation amongst a group of people. But there's no keyboard and mouse plugged into it, so we're not clicking around or filtering. These are really just trying to find interesting ways to display KPIs and get people talking about things that are normally tucked away behind layers of security and clicks. And then when we have to think of us, how are we going to get someone to care about something that they might not care about? This is when I say, well, is there some sort of story we can thread throughout this? And what I mean by that is, what is the beginning and what is the end? So can we give them a really solid beginning, meaning let's set the stage very clearly. Let's give them a paragraph about why this dashboard exists, where the data comes from, and how you should intend users to use it. Then we have all of our data in a nice looking dashboard, but then what is that end concept too? Is there something we can jump them to? Can we push them to another dashboard? Can we build in some sort of functionality of like, hey, we heard that you have to export this stuff and then email it out, so let's just go ahead and build a button in right there to automate some of this stuff. That's the kind of thing I'm trying to think of, is have we introduced the subject really well? Have they cared about it? And then is there some sort of action to get out and to keep on with their day? And another way to think of that, or to think of, telling a story, would be just the concept of characters. Who is our main character and who is our supporting cast? You'll see this show up in an example I show here shortly. But essentially, thinking, hey, we have a cast of characters. I don't want my users paying attention to the full cast at the same time. It's really just going to be one, but with some people standing in the background, kind of supporting the message. Without everyone screaming at you at the same time, if you will. So that might seem a little bit ambiguous, and like how how do I get people to move from the beginning to middle and end, or middle to the end? We use pre-attentive attributes to assist this storytelling. So things that the human eye can just not help but to recognize. So at the top of that list would be length, which is partially why we go for bar charts a lot of times, a combination of, intricate bar charts to indicate weight of something or the amount of impact that something has, where all the way through position, color, size, and then finally shape being the most nuanced and kind of hard to discern. But using all of these elements might look something kind of like this, where in each of these sections, there's some sort of thing that your brain is doing of like, I am treating these things differently because of the way that they are styled. And in a way, you're kind of manipulating a user's brain to be like, well, this is this, and this is why you should look at this. And so we're going to be employing some of these tactics when we think of data design, so that we can cut through the noise and have people further understanding the stuff that we spend, hours upon hours in building Tableau dashboards. Okay, so then getting inspired so that we are actually creating cool stuff that we're proud of. Save websites or dashboards that elicit a positive emotion and try to mimic those things that create that emotion. So that might be in an app that you use a lot. Maybe there's a game that you pull up on your iPhone. Try to just like check out, its conventions of a menu. How do you get into a menu? Do you swipe? Do you hit a button? How is that menu divided? Is there a pixel divider? Is there white space around those elements? And I ask you all to just, think about those things, because if we are talking about, creating Tableau dashboards, well, that is an act of putting content on a screen for people to consume. And so we can borrow tricks from other user interface designers, other apps, all sorts of things, to be inspired about how we can pull our data together to kind of view it in a new way. So if you need some inspiration, go to behance.net. This is where I have my own personal design portfolio. There is an interaction tab that just focuses on app design and UI design. And I would say 95% of it is not Tableau related, but the concepts that I'm trying to get across of like, hey, let's see how these menus were put together. Let's see how this one display was put together. For looking at hierarchy, color, scale, you're going to get tons of good ideas by seeing what you can find here and then being like, okay, how could I challenge myself to make this reasonable within my dashboard? And then for more Tableau specific advice, I would for sure push you to the Interworks blog. This is one of my favorite things on the blog. It's called Offerings from the Tableau Bar Chart Menu. And it's great because we've linked to this Tableau public dashboard where you can see how we built all these different variations of bar charts and really pushed this chart type to do a lot. It's really putting in the work here. And go to this thing and you can download it with that button on the bottom right and play around with it, see how it was built and copy some things out of it. We would love that. I say that because when I first started, doing Tableau stuff 4.5, 5 years ago, this screen really intimidated me. I felt like this is when I felt my most imposter syndrome of like, maybe this isn't the right thing for me to be focusing on. Like, I don't know much about data, but over time, things will change. And if you can bolster yourself with a sketch of maybe what you want to achieve in the end, or at least a color palette to help you understand like, hey, this is going to be this color and this is going to be that color, or some good examples of other successful visualizations, then creating a new workbook should be a whole lot less intimidating. And then I have to encourage everyone to pick up the pencil and draw a little bit more than you are today. All 99% of my dashboards start on paper or on my iPad by just drawing what is essentially a bunch of rectangles. I know that everyone here can do this, and I know that if you do this more often, the people you're working with will really appreciate having some semblance of a visual to collaborate on. So, we have all these different ideas in our heads about what this dashboard is supposed to look like, but when push comes to shove and then the dashboard's actually in Tableau, it might turn out to be something that no one really expected. So if we can communicate in small form, I do recommend, just doing like sticky note size things, because it'll force you to iterate and do more of them. And it'll also force you to be more cognizant of your real estate so that you don't, get too in the weeds, but you can kind of just scribble things out if you need to and move essentially rectangles around the page. If you really don't want to pick up a pen, you can use Freehand. Freehand is an excellent tool that I use all the time in Interworks. It is a product of InVision, and it is a great way for people to collaborate digitally. And it helps you in drawing those rectangles out pretty well. You basically have a pen tool, type tool, rectangles and circles, sticky notes, and you can send a link to anyone you're working with, and they can kind of collaborate with you in a huge whiteboard space. They also prompt you with a bunch of great templates that you can just kind of get started with. And so we highly recommend, drawing or using a tool like this to get these ideas out of your head before you actually begin the development process. And what I do is I use a tool called Sketch. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but essentially it's a multi-screen design tool that really helps me, make sense of big projects. Because, when we have a concept of, hey, there's going to be 25 dashboards and they all got to link together somehow, but we have no idea where to start. That's when I have to start kind of segmenting stuff out and be like, okay, what's the entry level? What's going to be on the second floor, meaning a little bit restricted access? What's the third floor, meaning like these are really for specific groups and they're not going to be accessed by everyone, but they still need to be relevant to whoever's, walking all the way to the third floor. This really helps to be able to have a tool like Sketch that, this is kind of what it looks like. There's a whole bunch of screens available. What I would do in my situation is I would design different instances of a dashboard, and then I'm creating buttons in here, I'm creating bar charts in here, text, lists, all sorts of things. And that's how I get my really polished prototypes. So that was kind of the floor plan section, the first of 3 sections that I'm going to present about. But I'm going to transition now into a UI checklist that I created several years ago that helps me audit dashboarding projects so that me and our expanding experienced design team can be on the same page when it comes to working on a client's project together. So this is just a really linear way for us to run through, hey, first do this, then check this, and then check this. And if you want, you can go to the Interworks blog, Duncan, and you'll find that I've written some stuff about each of these points here. But we're going to go into a little bit more detail today. However, we're only going to focus on what I have deemed as the top 4 tips for the checklist. So, you know, all of these are very important. I kind of feel bad not acknowledging all 9 of them, but for the sake of time, we're just going to focus on these 4 things right now. So first things first, try to let your titles define your spaces. So keep your titles simple yet descriptive. And this is kind of where this concept of the floor plan or blueprint comes to mind, because we're trying to put together pieces from almost like a top-down view. So in this example from Tableau Public, this is a dashboard with a lot of really important information, but it's hard to kind of follow along where our eye is supposed to lead. So to illustrate this fact, you know, so I've zoomed out on the dashboard. Everywhere where there was a title on this dashboard, I put a white box over it, dashboard title or a chart title. And anywhere where there was context about the data, I put a green box over it. And the data just kind of, you know, floats in the middle. So by doing this, we are now seeing, hey, our titles are not defining our spaces. We have not gone in to say, like, I want 30% of my space dedicated to this, 10% for this, 10% for this, 10% for this. It's kind of like we just kind of kept adding things and then, you know, expanding our Tableau dashboard to just kind of keep being longer and longer and longer. And so what I would suggest instead is to kind of just, you know, forget about the data for a second, but at least if we can understand the titles of what we want to show here, then let's just use those titles and those basic shapes to come up with a new layout that at least fits on a grid, right? And that can play with the amount of space that we're allocating for something. And then we can go back in and slot the data into those spaces so that we can, you know, let our titles drive this and let it define our spaces like the tip says. And then in a outside of the dashboard real world example, I went to go look at apartments with a friend here in Tulsa, Oklahoma last year. And we had these floor plans to look at before going to look at them. And it was curious just because I would think that I would want to go, you know, move into the spot that has the most square footage, the one right in the center, 900 square feet. You know, it's not too different, but that's just what my guess would be. But it was confusing because once we got a little bit, you know, closer to actually checking these places out, we were like, wait, why would the one with the most space be the cheapest of them all? Something kind of has to be going on there. And so it was good to be able to compare these kind of top level views, but it wasn't really until we got into the space to walk around the space to understand, oh, that's why this one is the cheapest. And it's because of this weird, awkward, unused space right at the beginning, right when you walk in the front door. There's this huge, almost like glorified hallway that you can't put a chair in, you can't put a table in, you can't really do much with. And so it's this huge amount of wasted space that just didn't really work for the apartment, in my opinion. And so I use that as an example is because it's like, you know, at the end of the day, we weren't going for the most square footage in the apartment. We're going for the most usable space. And it took us actually visiting the space to walk around it to understand, you know what, that didn't work out. We should go with this other one that uses this limited space more effectively. Next item that I'm going to talk about would be hierarchy. So use your text sizes intentionally to create a hierarchy and try to limit your text sizes to 3 different sizes and weights. This slide kind of speaks for itself. And to further illustrate this concept of hierarchy, imagine you have several things. These things I'm representing with bars here, 3 boxes, right? They look the same. And we don't care about one or the other until we add in some hierarchy. We say, we can now be like, okay, that thing on the bottom isn't quite as important. I now can know to look for just this one thing, or maybe I'm always going to be looking for this bigger rectangle. So then hierarchy comes into play when you start this thinking of multiples of similar things. So without hierarchy, it becomes even more chaotic because there's lots of things to look at in lots of different places. But if we can, drive home that hierarchy, then if we add it in there, our eyes are going to start to have things to link to. So we can say, oh, I was actually only looking for the category title, which might be that small, skinny white rectangle. Now my eye knows exactly where to look. And I've just shrunk what I have to look for down to 1, 2, 5, 6, 7 things instead of, 21 things. And then to take that even further, we have these modules. Let's put these modules into a sense of hierarchy so that if we have a whole sitemap, or if we have, maybe this is a really complex dashboard, using hierarchy like this, now I can tell users, pay attention to this stuff primarily, set the stage up top with some things that are nice to knows, and then maybe you can have some exploratory things at the bottom. This might seem kind of abstract right now, but try to sit on that concept as we go into this, which is 3 lines of text that all look the same exact way. But when we start adding some variation into it, maybe we change the weight of things, we add some caps, we make some text gray, or we add some kerning or letter spacing in there. We add in a background to try to change the contrast of things. We can break out of that bounding box with our title. We might add in a color for our chart title. And what we're doing here is we are establishing hierarchy by using the same typeface, just different weights of it and different shades of the same color. And so we've now created a module that can then be replicated elsewhere. And so now anytime our user sees that blue bar with that big title up above, they're going to know what they're looking at. It's not going to be some new puzzle to figure out. It's just something we can pick and run with. And we can carry that out through the next 100 dashboards we build, and people aren't going to be guessing where they click on each single dashboard. And then to make this even more realistic, I will actually now jump into a dashboard. So here's a dummy dashboard. We're looking at some banks and departments and performance. So hierarchy makes its display in several ways here. So we see it in our text. We have our dashboard title. Nothing is styled quite like it is, except for just that line of text. Our chart titles are styled the same. They're purple and they have a triangle next to them, indicating if you click this thing with a triangle, it will jump you to a new dashboard. Nothing else is going to be styled that way because I don't want anyone getting confused or clicking on things that they expect to take them to a new dashboard, but it doesn't. And then our data is always going to show up with the same gray Tableau font text. This is the Tableau font. It is my favorite font to use in Tableau because it is really well designed for numbers and text, and it's really flexible. But that's an aside. Okay, hierarchy. So then we also see hierarchy in the containers that we're using. So this is kind of that main character and supporting cast concept that I talked about earlier. We have our main character here. This huge container has the most contrast. I have some things off to the side that are going to support what I'm talking about, but I don't want to encourage users to drive the experience from those things in the sidebar. I would rather them click something in the primary area and then have the secondary and tertiary area react to that, right? So that it's more of a contextual sidebar, if you will. And we are utilizing color to help establish these things that I'm talking about. So I say, primary container, well, it's the thing that has this subtle drop shadow around it. It's the biggest container on the page. And by having this gray background, that's what allows me to have this white container that kind of feels a little bit different. And that allows me to put the dashboard title and the introductory sentences and the legend, they're kind of in the background, but they're still at the head of everything, right? They're not demanding too much attention, but they are still saying like, hey, here, I'm setting the stage. And this is all just based off of the slight gray background color, the white for the really high contrast stuff where I want a lot of attention in the primary and secondary containers. And then I flip that convention with the tertiary container to kind of push that even further into the background from everything else. So I feel like I just went kind of really hard on hierarchy, but hopefully some of that stuck. Okay, so the third thing I'm going to talk about on the checklist would be graphics and using them sparingly. I used to try to, yield people from, don't put photographs of your headquarters in your Tableau dashboard, because that should be more like on the website that links you to the dashboard. We have limited real estate when we're in Tableau, so we don't necessarily want to waste it with photography or illustration, when we could kind of bump that out into maybe the wrapper the dashboard lives in. So I really just want to kind of talk about iconography and templates. So for iconography, I've seen way too many times over I don't know how many dashboards I've done, hundreds and hundreds of dashboards, where the icons are just not the same quality. And so that comes down to line quality, meaning how thick are the outlines of all these icons. Are they the same exact black color, or are they gray or white? And then do they have text next to them? But all I want to say is, try to find icons that live in the same family. And whether that's you come to Interworks and say, hey, Interworks, we need some custom icons, that would be me. I would design a custom set of icons for you. Or you could use something like Noun Project, which is a fascinating tool with just tens of thousands of icons that you can source. It's a paid tool. But that way you can find icons that live in the same family. They all have strokes around them that are the same. They're all filled. They're all the same, same fidelity, meaning some are not too intricate and some are like really basic looking. We want them to all feel like they're in the same family, not just for aesthetic, but for trust. We want this to feel like it is part of our brand. We want this to feel like this belongs here next to this data. If the data is communicating millions of dollars worth of cash being transferred throughout organizations, and our icons look like crap, then it's going to be like, wait, where did this fall off? Like, how is it that we care so much about this data part of it, but not how this is all communicating to the user? That's what I encourage you to find, some solid icons that you feel really good about, that help communicate your ideas clearly. And when you're not using icons, we might use imagery in the form of templates. And so these could be really, really basic squares on a page, just to help give us a grid system in Tableau. So it could be a 1200 by 900 JPEG that just has squares on it, that maybe Carlos could put in a dashboard, lay out his content, and then delete that background image, so that no one will ever know that he had a really sick grid system to align everything to. Or maybe it was a really high fidelity image in the background that might look something like this, that allowed us to implement some more branding, custom angles based on the brand's request, perhaps rounded corners on these containers, just to break the conventions that we might be used to when landing at a Tableau dashboard. So I want people to feel like this is part of their ecosystem, like it belongs, and like it fits right into the other things they're working with. And how this might play out is you'd have to have that image in the background, but then you could then float content, or be really precise with the way you're using containers in Tableau to get all of this stuff to line up. And then you just have this glorified kind of stage set for all of this data. The last tip on the checklist is accessibility. The last tip that I'm going to discuss today is accessibility. In this animated GIF here, you see that it is the same dashboard, but one version of it has a lot of color, the other version does not. And we gain understanding when there is less color, because we are more cognizant of how we are drawing correlation between items. We are then able to use that pre-attentive attribute to tell a story. We can say these two things are related, so pay attention to that. Or these things are next to each other, so pay attention to how they are reacting to each other. So just be aware of colorblind pitfalls. And if you are color crazy, then let's just try to tone down the amount of colors that we are going to put on the dashboard. But if we need help coming up with these colors in the first place, I recommend a tool like Color Supply. There's a ton of color tools out there, so use whatever works best for you. I just like this one because it allows us to browse based on color theory, and it allows me to visualize the color wheel of how these things relate to each other. So if I'm finding, you know, a color palette for things that are related, I'm going to look for the blues and the greens that are right next to each other because I don't want them to be too disparate from one another. Whereas if I have to have three things that are wildly different from each other, then I'm going to want them to be further apart from each other on the color wheel. And by playing with these relationships and seeing a lot of this stuff in action, it allows you to cycle through and allows you to, say absolutely not that. I'm going to totally stay away from yellow. And that's a step in the design process. You at least now know you're going to stay away from yellow. That's one, check that off. So do this, take a screenshot of good color palettes that you come up with, and then see how you can implement them into your dashboarding work. So, accessibility isn't all just about color, but, we want to make sure that there's high contrast, that we maybe have language options so we can make things more accessible to more users. But all that we can really say that we can be really sure in is that we want to encourage you to ask people. So get some tests in front of people and watch them use it. And when in doubt, lean toward simple. So put the dashboard in front of them, watch them move the mouse around. Take note when they take a big deep breath of like, I don't know what to do. Take note of when they click something that you're not intending for them to click. Those types of things are ways that we can understand of like, that's how people will use this. And let's now take another stab at redesigning this to imagine what if. We can see this concept in real life with the concept of desire paths. There is an entire subreddit dedicated to desire paths if this rings interesting for anyone. But the concept is that humans are always going to find their own ideal way to get from point A to point B. And so we've designed these beautiful, huge sidewalks that we want everyone to just like walk in this amazing circle, but then we forget the point that, oh, actually people want to go there, and we didn't design a way for them to get there. And so by paying attention to these user patterns, the ruts in the mud, or the way that people click when they are frustrated on a dashboard, that's what I'm talking about, is trying to be aware of how people want to use something, because they're going to find a way to get around it and do exactly what they're looking for. So it's getting familiar with that user and their frustrations. In this desire path, you can see that clearly people were walking for years directly up to the front door. They built a new gate there, maybe to prevent that. People are still not going around to the sidewalk. They're making their own new path, the shortest path there of where they're trying to get to. I think what is most fascinating is when you take a much bigger look at things regarding desire paths. But this example was, it had snowed for a week. The snow starts to melt off eventually. Life comes back to the streets. Cars start driving around. And there are certain lanes that are more popular than others, meaning the snow is gone. So if we can look at where the snow still exists, those are things where people have not used. So let's try to think of, wait, maybe that could be a spot for pedestrians. Maybe we could add in better crosswalks. Maybe we could completely reimagine these streets that people have been totally used to come up with something that's more efficient and better for the organization overall. So that is the checklist, at least what I'm going to talk about, the checklist today. And like I said, you can find a blog about these things on interworks.com. But I am not done. I have just a little bit more content. So we talked about the floor plan, which is setting up for a huge design project. We talked about the checklist, which is, hey, I'm in the midst of a design project and I've got to make improvements to it. But now it is take it further. So what's this last step we can do to go above and beyond? So at Interworks, we say, if someone interacts with it, how can you help them enjoy it? The answers, in my opinion, are we collaborate with each other, we experiment and try silly and exciting things, and we ask for really specific critique. Because I don't want to just create something and then me think it's good and then no one else thinks it's good, because then it's not going to get used. So iterate often. Back to this house analogy, this is a nice bathroom. This is way more modern than my bathroom at my house. This is, has the things that belong in a bathroom. There's 2 sinks. That's dope. That's great. There's a huge tub and a shower. Amazing. Lots of space. But what if we didn't take the time to imagine what could be? Yes, we were checking the boxes of sink, tub, closet access, shower. Sure, that's great. But what if we took this to someone else and be like, hey, what could this space be? We might not have realized how much better it would be. Maybe for one, the most glaring thing is getting rid of that step that surrounds the bathtub, because then you're just going to fall as soon as you get out of the bathtub. It seems scary. Also, that was like a very huge weight in that room. It just felt like it was just like crammed in that corner. But we wouldn't have thought of, let's get light reflected in this space with a big mirror right next to the natural light. Let's exchange those dark countertops with really bright countertops to help reflect light around the space. And let's have a better floor pattern that also helps reflect light. We wouldn't have gotten there had we not taken the step to imagine what if. Obviously, in this situation, there was a lot of money spent on this bathroom renovation. But with Tableau stuff, we're in a digital world. And so what I want to encourage people to do is to take a dashboard that is successful, it's checking the boxes, but then let's create a duplicate of it. And now we have a completely separate environment that we can take 2 versions of this workbook to a coworker, a friend, family member, and say which one of these is working best for you. And ask for specific feedback, because this is when you're going to become much more confident in your design decisions, because you're going to be like, wow, that color choice, like that was a clear winner there. Going to keep that convention for the rest of my dashboarding work, maybe. And I say request specific feedback because a lot of times I have found myself in situations where people do think, it's just good enough. It is checking those boxes of, yep, that has the head count, that has, whatever over time. That's all we asked for. But what if you get in there and it just isn't really working for the people, and we haven't asked for enough specific feedback? So in all of these places, I have this slide because the idea was like, we've been locked up in a quarantine for the past year, and we are just now kind of getting into the stage of let's think about travel. And so let's just imagine that I book a trip to this modern living place for September. I'm only reading about it online. It has enough bedrooms for me and my guests. It has the bathrooms. It has a cool yard. Check. But what happens if we actually get there and it's awful and we didn't get to see inside and the user flow of it? What if we open the front door and we're greeted with this tiny hallway that forces us to go through a window into a bedroom, and we get to looking around and the bedroom leads to a really confusing washer and dryer room where they're separated by a long hallway? And then it's like, wait, I thought where's the bathrooms here? Well, they're there, but they're just in a separate building outside. You have to go through the garage to get to the bathroom. That is not what we want users to experience. And that is kind of what I do experience from time to time when we pass around dashboards, or I come across a dashboard that looks confusing. And I'm saying, why would we put location on a color code? Orange is North America and blue is everywhere that's not North America. Our axes are not aligned. I have nowhere for my eyes to rest. There is no sort of hierarchy at play here. This is a scrambled mess. This is like this. So let's go through the checklist. Let's avoid that. Let's try to just use titles to define our spaces. Let's get it to some semblance of understanding. We have a hierarchy in place, and then let's keep iterating on that. Maybe it's passing it to a coworker. Maybe it's doing it again a week later. Maybe it's doing it quarterly for spring cleaning of your dashboards. Because what if we get to a good spot here where we're checking the boxes, but we weren't realizing that, hey, we could support these KPIs a little bit more, or hey, we could totally change the colors. And by the way, you forgot about this geo component that is incredibly important. Or maybe we need to put all of this stuff in a curator environment, which is Curator is an Interworks offering that allows you to host dashboards in a web environment. So we could offload filtering, we could offload navigation, and we could offload alerts all into a web environment, and then just let Tableau just do what it's doing best, exploring analytics. We wouldn't have gotten to this point had we not done the iteration and questioned, is this really serving everyone? So at the end, this is finally it. The goals for doing this. I want there to be pride in the work that people spend hours upon hours, clicking around, making things work. I want them to feel really proud about the work that they do on a daily basis. I want our clients to feel really proud of the energy and brain power that they put into figuring out some solution for this. I want to simplify that whole experience so there are fewer gates between you and what you're looking for. And since we are putting stuff on a screen, I am going to be consuming people's time with the things that I put onto a screen. That kind of puts us in the driver's seat of designers. And so we are in a position to possibly bring joy to that whole experience. And so when you can do that, why not? So whether designing for interfaces or experiences, keep the user at the heart of the design process. Thank you, everyone. That is all I have for today. And yeah, right at noon. Here's some resources for some of the items that I talked about. You can screenshot that if you would like. And then always feel free to shoot me a design question over email. I'm happy to help geek out about those things.
David, super, super, super interesting. I know, at least in my experience within Tableau over the past several years, my mind goes to the data first and not necessarily to the design. And those two things need to commingle. They need to live together in order for this whole thing to be successful. So incredibly awesome content to everybody listening. This is actually being recorded. We'll post this in the Tableau user group across a couple different platforms as well. David, there was a question that came across early in your talk. Alex asked about the difference between length and size, and where length being more important than size, but aren't they kind of similar? How would you answer that?
Yeah, so I guess where that comes into play would be radials and dots, like the dot size of something. Like if you have a scatter plot and you're putting a huge metric just in, hey, you should know that this one is more important because it's bigger, but there could be a ton of information trapped in a smaller dot that just didn't get communicated properly. Our brains are not good at realizing the relationship of dot sizes. And to take that even one step further, a popular topic is pie charts. I try to stay away from pie charts and donut charts because humans are not good at realizing size ratios of things. It's hard for us to determine how much real estate is actually in a slice of that radial. So that's kind of one way for us to just default to, hey, let's put it in a single line because we can at least track, hey, this is not as long as this bar.
Got it. Well said.
Thank you.
I'm stealing the screen sharing back.
Great.
Hopefully you guys can see just the screen now. Just to close, we had some questions there, but I think we're good there. And David pointed out his email address. Feel free to reach out to myself as well on the Interworks side, or Mikkel on the Tableau side. Email addresses are there. Like I said, we'll post this again. Please do join the Tableau user group on LinkedIn for sports and entertainment. We saw quite a few responses actually come in through there during David's talk, which is terrific. Thanks for joining there. We'll be posting a whole lot of content that'll hopefully help you guys internally make better data decisions through the use of Tableau, and hopefully seeing some cool stuff that you guys do moving forward with awesome design tactics as well too. So thank you everybody for joining. David, can't thank you enough for giving that chat, incredibly insightful. And the next chat that we have scheduled is going to be hopefully in the middle of June, with some great content from teams and organizations around the sports and entertainment space. Hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon, a great end to the week, and we will see you next time.